You ever notice how the quietest man in the room is usually the one everyone should be listening to? The laughter came easy and loud under the wide Texas sky, bouncing off the red brick walls of Westfield War College like it had all afternoon. It was family day, and the parade field stretched out in perfect symmetry, 300 yards of trimmed grass bordered by rows of white folding chairs and polished brass. Cadets in pressed gray uniforms moved in confident clusters, their shoes reflecting the sun, their voices sharp with youth and certainty. William Mercer stood near the edge of the reviewing stand, hands resting lightly on a worn oak cane, his posture slightly stooped but steady. At 79, his white hair caught the light like frost, and his navy blazer hung neatly over a plain button-down shirt. No medals, no ribbons, just a small, rectangular name badge that read visitor. Logan Pierce noticed him first. "Sir, this area is restricted to active cadets and faculty," he said, polite in tone but edged with authority he had practiced in the mirror. Noah Bennett and Caleb Foster drifted closer, forming an unspoken triangle around the old man. They were tall, broad-shouldered, future officers in the making. Their confidence filled the space like humidity before a storm. Mercer looked at the parade field instead of at them, his pale blue eyes tracking the American flag as it snapped in a steady 10-mile-per-hour crosswind. "Just watching," he said softly. Caleb smirked. "Watching what exactly?" Logan crossed his arms. "You prior service?" The question wasn't hostile yet, just probing. Mercer didn't answer immediately. He adjusted his grip on the cane, the wood smooth from years of use. Noah leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only the four of them could hear. "Come on, sir. Every old story starts with a call sign. What was yours?" The words carried a hint of mockery now, light enough to pass as a joke, sharp enough to draw blood if it landed right. A couple of nearby cadets glanced over, sensing the shift in tone. Mercer finally turned his head. His gaze was calm, almost distant, as if he were measuring something none of them could see. Logan chuckled. "Bet you don't even remember it." The wind moved again, rippling the flag, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and jet fuel from the training airstrip half a mile away. For a long second, Mercer said nothing. The silence stretched, thin and tight. Noah grinned, expecting a sheepish shrug, maybe an embarrassed laugh. Instead, the old man's voice came low and steady, barely above the wind. "Atlas III. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just two words, spoken without emphasis." Caleb's smile faded first. Logan's posture stiffened, almost imperceptibly. Noah blinked as if he'd misheard. 20 feet away, Captain Andrew Lawson stopped mid-step. He had been reviewing notes for the afternoon briefing, but the name drifted across the field and hit him like a memory he hadn't known he carried. Atlas III. The sound of it didn't belong in casual conversation. It belonged in lectures spoken in hushed tones, in archived files marked restricted, in stories that ended with the words classified and redacted. Lawson slowly lowered the folder in his hand. The cadets didn't notice him yet. They were still staring at Mercer, waiting for the punchline. None came. The wind seemed to quiet. Even the chatter from the stands thinned to a distant murmur. Mercer looked back toward the flag, his expression unchanged. He didn't explain. He didn't repeat it. He didn't need to. Behind them, Captain Lawson felt his pulse climb as realization settled in, heavy and undeniable. Some names were history, some were legend, and some were never meant to be spoken out loud. Captain Andrew Lawson did not believe in coincidences, especially not on a parade field measured to the inch and governed by schedule down to the minute. Yet the words he had just heard did not fit inside coincidence. They carried weight. Atlas III. He felt it in his chest, a tightening that had nothing to do with the Texas heat. Logan Pierce recovered first, forcing a short laugh that sounded thinner than before. Atlas III. He repeated, testing it, as if saying it again might reduce it to something ordinary. Caleb glanced at Noah, searching for reassurance. "Never heard of it," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Mercer did not react. He shifted his stance slightly, leaning more on the cane, the oak tip pressing into the trimmed grass. His eyes remained on the flag, watching the subtle shift in the wind. 10 miles per hour had become closer to 12. Captain Lawson began walking toward them, not hurried, not dramatic, but with deliberate purpose. His polished shoes crossed the distance steadily, each step quiet against the turf. He stopped just outside the cadet's circle. "Gentlemen," he said evenly. The three snapped to attention out of reflex. Logan's jaw tightened. "Sir." Lawson's gaze did not linger on the cadets. It moved to Mercer, studying him carefully now. The white hair, the calm posture, the absence of decoration. "Sir," Lawson said to Mercer, the tone noticeably different. "Did you say Atlas 3? Mercer finally turned fully toward him. The movement was unhurried, controlled. "I did." No explanation followed. Lawson felt the world narrow slightly. He had sat through briefings during his own training years ago, closed-door sessions where instructors spoke of certain operations only in context, never in detail. A reconnaissance team that had operated beyond official maps. A call sign that appeared once in archived communications and then vanished. Atlas 3 had been described as the last signal transmitted before an extraction that never made the news. The file had ended with a single line, status unresolved. Lawson swallowed. "Sir, may I ask your full name?" "William Mercer," he replied. The name settled heavily into place. Lawson had read it once, buried in a citation recommendation that had never been publicly issued. The cadets watched the exchange, confusion deepening. Logan's earlier confidence drained by degrees. "Captain," with respect, Noah said carefully. "Is there a problem?" Lawson did not look at him. "Cadet Bennett," he said quietly. "Sometimes the problem is assuming you understand the room." He stepped aside slightly and reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. His thumb hovered for a fraction of a second before dialing a direct line rarely used outside formal channels. The call connected on the second ring. "Operations," a voice answered crisply. Lawson kept his eyes on Mercer. "This is Captain Andrew Lawson at Westfield War College. I need confirmation on a legacy identifier." A pause. "Go ahead." Lawson drew a slow breath. "Atlas 3 has just identified himself on the parade field." Silence answered him, deep and immediate. Even through the faint speaker hum, he could feel it shift. The voice returned, stripped of its earlier casual tone. "Repeat that." "Atlas 3 is present," Lawson said clearly. "Standing in front of me." The wind moved again across the grass, flattening it in a subtle wave. Mercer remained still, composed, as if the unfolding tension belonged to someone else entirely. Around them, the afternoon sun continued to shine, bright and indifferent, but the air within that small circle had changed. Some names faded with time. Others were archived, and a rare few carried a gravity that did not diminish, no matter how many years passed. The silence on the other end of the line did not feel like confusion. It felt like recognition. Captain Lawson stood motionless, phone pressed to his ear, eyes steady on William Mercer. The faint noise of wind across the microphone was the only sound between words. Finally, the voice from operations returned, lower now, controlled. "Captain, remain where you are. Do not escalate. Confirm the individual's full name." Lawson did not look away from Mercer. "William Henry Mercer," he said clearly. A pause followed, longer this time, filled with the muted shuffling of papers or keys striking a secure keyboard. 30 yards away, a formation of second-year cadets began marching drills, their cadence echoing faintly across the field, unaware that history had just stepped quietly onto their campus. Logan Pierce felt the shift before he understood it. His earlier grin had disappeared entirely. He glanced at Noah and Caleb, searching for a shared explanation, but neither offered one. Mercer stood composed, hands resting lightly over the handle of his cane, shoulders relaxed as though this was no more than a passing breeze. The phone crackled softly. "Captain Lawson," the operations officer said, voice stripped of any casual tone. "Step away from the cadets. Address the individual with respect. Command authority has been notified." Lawson felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. "Understood." He lowered the phone slowly. The three cadets watched him, confusion now edged with unease. "Sir," Logan ventured carefully. Lawson finally turned his head toward them, expression firm but controlled. "Cadets," he said quietly, "you are dismissed from this interaction. Maintain bearing." They hesitated for half a second before stepping back instinctively, their boots pressing into the grass with measured restraint. Mercer did not move. His gaze remained outward, toward the distant runway where a training aircraft taxied slowly under the bright sky. Lawson stepped closer to him now, reducing the space that had earlier been defined by authority. "Sir," he said respectfully, "I apologize for the tone you encountered." Mercer gave a faint nod. "They are young," he replied. "Youth carries volume." The words were not bitter. They were observational. Lawson's phone vibrated in his hand. A message displayed only 2 words, confirmed identity. Beneath it, a secondary instruction followed immediately, General en route. Lawson exhaled slowly. Across the campus, a pair of black command vehicles turned onto the main drive, their movement controlled but unmistakably purposeful. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just steady forward motion, tires gliding over pavement at a deliberate speed. Noah Bennett noticed them first. "What is that?" he whispered. Caleb felt his pulse rise as the vehicles advanced closer to the parade grounds, their dark paint reflecting the sunlight like polished stone. Faculty members along the walkway began to stand straighter without fully understanding why. Mercer shifted his weight slightly, eyes still calm, as though the approaching presence was neither surprise nor spectacle. The wind eased momentarily, and the flag above them fell into a brief, heavy stillness. Logan swallowed. "Captain," he asked carefully, "who exactly is he?" Lawson did not answer immediately. His gaze followed the approaching convoy, then returned to Mercer with a measure of quiet respect that had not existed 10 minutes earlier. "He is someone," Lawson said softly, "whose name was never meant to fade." The vehicles rolled to a controlled stop at the edge of the field. Doors opened in synchronized motion, and every conversation within earshot slowly came to an end. The doors closed behind the departing drivers with a muted, deliberate sound that carried farther than it should have across the open field. Conversations faded in widening circles, replaced by the rhythmic tap of polished shoes against pavement. Faculty members who had been casually observing the afternoon drills straightened without being told. The air shifted from relaxed ceremony to quiet anticipation in a matter of seconds. Major General Richard Holloway stepped forward from the lead vehicle, for silver stars catching the sun in clean, sharp flashes. His uniform was immaculate, the dark fabric pressed with precision, ribbons aligned with exacting symmetry. He did not look around. He did not survey the crowd. His eyes locked immediately onto the lone figure, standing calmly with a cane at the edge of the parade ground. Captain Lawson snapped to attention before the general had taken 3 steps. The cadets followed half a beat later, boots striking the grass in sudden, unified stillness. William Mercer did not move. He did not adjust his jacket. He did not shift his weight. He simply watched as the distance closed. The general crossed the final 20 feet without hesitation, each step measured, controlled. The field had fallen into a near-complete silence now, broken only by the distant hum of a training aircraft and the steady rustle of the flag above them. Major General Holloway stopped directly in front of Mercer. For a moment that seemed longer than it was, neither man spoke. The difference in age was clear. The difference in posture was not. Then, with deliberate precision, the general raised his right hand in a crisp, unwavering salute. The motion was sharp, exact, carried out with the kind of discipline that leaves no room for interpretation. Gasps did not erupt. No one dared. But the shift was undeniable. 3 cadets who had been laughing minutes earlier now stood frozen, eyes wide, trying to reconcile what they were witnessing. A 4-star general saluting a visitor badge. The salute was held. Not symbolic. Not casual. Held. William Mercer regarded him calmly, pale blue eyes steady. After a measured second, he returned the gesture with a slight incline of his head rather than a raised hand, acknowledging respect without spectacle. The general lowered his salute only after Mercer did. "Mr. Mercer," Holloway said, voice deep and resonant, carrying clearly across the silent grass. "It is an honor." Mercer's expression did not change. "General," he replied quietly. No rank was added. No elaboration offered. The general turned then, slowly, allowing his gaze to sweep across the cadets standing rigid behind him. His eyes settled on Logan Pierce, Noah Bennett, and Caleb Foster. They felt the weight of it immediately. "Gentlemen," Holloway said evenly, "there are names in our history that do not appear in textbooks. They do not hang on walls. They are not discussed in open classrooms." He paused, letting the words settle. "They are carried forward by those who understand what they represent." The wind picked up again, lifting the edge of Mercer's blazer slightly before settling back down. Holloway stepped half a pace aside, positioning himself not in front of Mercer but beside him. It was a subtle shift, but everyone saw it. Authority aligning with legacy rather than towering over it. Captain Lawson felt a steady sense of clarity now. This was not spectacle. It was correction. The general's voice softened slightly as he continued. Atlas III was never a story meant for applause. The words landed quietly, but the impact was unmistakable. Logan felt heat rise to his face. The confidence that had once filled his stance drained entirely, replaced by a humbling awareness that some questions carry consequences far greater than the asker understands. The parade field remained silent, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. In that stillness, the lesson was not shouted. It did not need to be. No one moved after the general finished speaking. The wind brushed lightly across the parade field, carrying the faint scent of jet fuel from the training strip half a mile away. But within that circle of stillness the air felt heavier, deliberate. Major General Holloway kept his position beside William Mercer, not ahead of him, not shielding him, but aligned. The distinction was subtle, yet unmistakable. Logan Pierce felt the weight of his own earlier words press against his ribs. What had started as casual teasing now echoed differently in his mind. Noah Bennett stared straight ahead, jaw tight, replaying the moment he had asked for a call sign as if it had been a harmless joke. Caleb Foster swallowed, the confidence that had once defined his posture replaced with something quieter and far more uncomfortable. General Holloway let the silence work before speaking again. "Cadets," he said evenly, his voice carrying without effort across the grass. "Leadership begins long before a commission is signed. It begins with how you measure the people in front of you." His eyes rested briefly on each of them. Not every uniform is visible. Mercer shifted his cane slightly, the soft press of wood against turf barely audible. His expression remained calm, neither vindicated nor offended. The absence of anger unsettled Logan more than any reprimand would have. Captain Lawson stood a step behind, watching the exchange unfold with a steady awareness that he was witnessing something that would be remembered long after the afternoon drills were forgotten. The general turned back to Mercer. "Sir," he said respectfully, "your presence here honors this institution." Mercer's gaze drifted once more toward the flag, now lifting steadily in a 15-mile-per-hour breeze. "Institutions do not need honor from me," he replied quietly. "They need memory." The words were simple, but they settled deeply. Holloway gave a faint nod of understanding. Around them, faculty members maintained formal composure, though several had softened. Expressions that betrayed recognition. Logan finally stepped forward, breaking formation with careful precision. His voice, when it came, lacked the sharp edge it had earlier. "Sir," he said to Mercer, eyes lowered in respect, "I apologize." Noah and Caleb followed a fraction of a second later, mirroring the gesture. Mercer regarded them without judgment. "You are training to carry weight," he said calmly. "Learn what it feels like before you assume you already can." The wind quieted again, as if punctuating the lesson. General Holloway allowed a brief moment to pass before speaking once more. "Atlas III," he said with quiet clarity, not as spectacle but as acknowledgement, represents discipline under pressure, restraint under uncertainty, and service without audience. He did not elaborate further. He did not need to. The meaning was understood in the way the cadets stood straighter, not out of fear, but out of awakening comprehension. In the distance, the training aircraft lifted from the runway, climbing steadily into the open sky. Mercer watched it ascend, eyes reflective, as if measuring altitude by instinct alone. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the grass, blending ranks and visitors alike into the same fading light. No applause followed. No ceremony was called. The lesson had already been delivered, and it had been delivered without volume, without anger, without spectacle. Some legacies do not demand attention. They simply stand in it, quiet and unshaken. The convoy did not depart immediately. The engines remained off, doors closed, as if even machinery understood that this was not a moment to rush. Major General Holloway stood with composed authority, but the edge of formality had softened into something more reflective. The cadets remained at attention, yet the stiffness in their shoulders was no longer driven by regulation alone. It was awareness. William Mercer shifted his gaze from the sky back to the field, scanning the rows of young uniforms stretching beyond the immediate circle. Sunlight traced the silver threads on their sleeves, the polished brass on their belts. For a brief second, the years seemed to fold inward, and the parade ground was no longer a campus but a memory layered beneath it. Not of noise, not of spectacle, just of young men standing where they believed certainty lived. Captain Lawson stepped forward quietly. "Sir," he said to Mercer, "the command building is prepared to host you, if you are willing." Mercer considered the invitation without hurry. "I did not come for a building," he replied gently. "I came to see whether the wind still moves the same here." Holloway allowed a faint smile to appear, restrained but genuine. "It does," he answered. "It always has." Logan Pierce listened carefully now, absorbing every word. The earlier embarrassment had shifted into something steadier, something more constructive. He stepped forward once more, careful not to break bearing. "Sir," he said, voice controlled, "if you are willing, I would like to learn more." Mercer regarded him with a thoughtful calm. "Learning begins when you stop asking to be impressed," he said, "and start asking to understand." Noah and Caleb felt the statement land just as firmly. The general took one measured step back, allowing space between rank and legacy. It was not surrender of authority. It was acknowledgement of its source. Across the field, instructors resumed quiet conversation, but the tone had changed. Word would travel, not as rumor, as reminder. Mercer adjusted his cane once more, then turned slightly toward the line of cadets beyond the three in front of him. His voice carried farther than expected, steady without strain. "You will wear bars and stars one day," he said. "When you do, remember that respect does not answer to volume. It answers to memory." The statement settled across the grass like evening light. No applause followed. No command was issued. The discipline of silence held firm. Major General Holloway nodded once, then extended his hand, not in ceremony, but in gratitude. Mercer accepted it briefly, the handshake firm despite age, steady despite time. The wind lifted again, bending the flag outward in a strong, clean line. A formation call sounded in the distance, crisp and clear, signaling the next scheduled drill. The cadence resumed across the campus as if the day had simply continued. Holloway stepped back toward his vehicle, posture returning to official bearing, but his expression remained reflective. Captain Lawson watched as Mercer began to walk slowly along the edge of the field, cane pressing softly into the grass with each measured step. No escort was demanded. No spotlight followed him. Logan, Noah, and Caleb remained at attention until he had moved several yards away. Then, quietly, almost instinctively, they straightened not because they were ordered to, but because they understood. Some lessons arrive in lectures. Others arrive in presence. And the most enduring ones leave without asking to be remembered. The cadence call faded into the distance as William Mercer continued along the outer edge of the parade field, each step deliberate, unhurried. The oak cane meeting the ground with a soft, steady rhythm. The late afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched across the grass like quiet reminders of time itself. Major General Holloway remained near the vehicles, speaking in low tones with Captain Lawson, but his eyes followed Mercer until distance and light softened the outline of his figure. Logan Pierce did not return immediately to formation. He stood still, watching the old man move with a calm that no longer felt ordinary. "Permission to speak freely, sir," Logan said quietly to Lawson. The captain studied him for a moment, then gave a single nod. "Granted." Logan inhaled slowly. "I thought leadership was about command presence, volume, certainty." He glanced toward Mercer. That did not look like any of that. Lawson's expression shifted, not stern, not indulgent, simply measured. "Presence does not need volume," he said. "Certainty does not need announcement." Noah and Caleb joined them, posture still formal, but eyes thoughtful. The parade drills resumed in full rhythm now, boots striking pavement in synchronized precision, yet the earlier tension had dissolved into something steadier. Mercer paused near the low stone wall that bordered the field, resting both hands on the cane as he looked back once more at the rows of cadets. The wind pressed against his blazer gently, lifting it just enough to reveal a small, faded stitching on the inner lining near the collar. It was not decoration. It was not rank. just a subtle reminder of years carried quietly. Holloway approached him again, without convoy, without ceremony. "Sir," he said respectfully, "there are young officers here who would benefit from hearing your perspective." Mercer shook his head slightly. "They have already heard it," he replied. "They just did not realize it." The general considered that, then nodded. The truth of it required no elaboration. Across the campus, word had already begun to move through measured channels. Not exaggerated, not embellished, simply stated. Atlas III had stood on the field. Logan stepped forward once more, this time without hesitation. "Sir," he called respectfully. Mercer turned his head. "Yes, cadet." Logan straightened, not out of regulation, but conviction. "I will remember." Mercer studied him. For a brief second, weighing tone more than words. Then he gave a faint nod. "Good." The simplicity of it carried more weight than any lecture. The sun edged closer to the horizon, bathing the brick buildings in warm amber light. The flag above the field held steady now in a clean 15-mile-per-hour breeze, fabric pulled taut and unwavering. Holloway extended his hand one final time. "Safe travels, Mr. Mercer." Mercer accepted the gesture briefly, firm and balanced. "Take care of them," he said quietly, glancing toward the cadets. "They are louder than they realize." The general allowed himself the faintest smile. Mercer resumed walking, moving past the stone wall and toward the parking lot beyond the academic buildings. No escort followed. No formal dismissal sounded. Yet along the parade ground, cadets stood a little straighter, conversations quieter, movements more deliberate. Logan, Noah, and Caleb returned to their formation without speaking. The lesson had not been written on a board or printed in a manual. It had unfolded in the open air, carried on a steady wind. And as the sun lowered beyond the western treeline, the field did not feel smaller. It felt deeper. Even after William Mercer disappeared beyond the line of brick academic halls, the space he had occupied did not feel empty. The late afternoon drills continued with measured precision, boots striking pavement in synchronized rhythm, commands carried clearly across the campus. But something in the tempo had shifted. It was not slower. It was steadier. Logan Pierce felt it first in his own breathing. The earlier rush of embarrassment had settled into focus. As the formation pivoted and realigned, he kept his eyes forward, yet his thoughts replayed the afternoon in deliberate detail. Atlas III. The words no longer sounded mysterious. They sounded earned. Noah Bennett adjusted his grip on his training rifle, careful and exact. He had spent 2 years believing that confidence meant never hesitating. Now he understood that hesitation, when paired with awareness, could be strength rather than weakness. Caleb Foster kept cadence with the unit, shoulders square, jaw set, but his mind returned to the moment the general had stepped beside Mercer instead of in front of him. That alignment had spoken louder than any reprimand. Captain Lawson remained near the reviewing stand, speaking briefly with instructors before dismissing them with a nod. He watched the cadets move through their drills, noting the subtle differences. No one was slouching. No one was whispering. The volume of the field had lowered without command. Major General Holloway had already departed, the convoy leaving as quietly as it had arrived, but the echo of his salute lingered in the discipline of the ranks. As the sun dipped closer to the horizon, casting a warm amber glow across the parade ground, the flag continued to hold firm in a steady 15-mile-per-hour breeze. Logan caught a glimpse of the distant parking lot beyond the buildings. The space where Mercer had walked now appeared ordinary again, just pavement and fading light. Yet it did not feel the same. When the final drill command sounded and the formation halted, the cadets stood in silence for a brief second longer than required. It was subtle, nearly imperceptible, but intentional. Lawson stepped forward, voice calm and measured. "Dismissed." The word carried cleanly across the field. Cadets broke formation in orderly lines, conversations beginning in low tones rather than the usual laughter. Logan approached Noah and Caleb without urgency. "We assumed," he said quietly. Neither argued. Caleb nodded once. "We will not again." There was no dramatic vow, no exaggerated promise, just a quiet understanding that the standard had shifted upward. As twilight began to settle over Westfield War College, the campus lights flickered on one by one, illuminating pathways and flagpoles with soft white halos. The brick buildings stood unchanged, yet the space between them felt heavier with meaning. In a classroom window overlooking the field, an instructor paused before closing the blinds, eyes resting on the grass where an old man had stood earlier that afternoon. Not for applause, not for recognition, just presence. The wind eased as evening settled in, leaving the flag hanging steady against the darkening sky. And across the campus, in barracks rooms and study halls, 3 cadets found themselves thinking less about rank and more about responsibility. Some lessons are scheduled. Others arrive unannounced. The most enduring ones leave quietly, but they do not leave lightly. Night settled fully over Westfield War College, wrapping the campus in a calm, deliberate quiet that felt earned rather than routine. The parade field, which had carried the weight of the afternoon, now rested under soft floodlights that cast long pale beams across the trimmed grass. In the barracks overlooking the field, Logan Pierce sat at his desk with his service manual open but unread. The pages blurred together as his mind replayed a single moment in perfect clarity, the instant a 4-star general had stepped beside an old man instead of in front of him. That alignment had redrawn his understanding of authority more clearly than any chapter he had studied. Across the hall, Noah Bennett leaned against the window, watching the flag illuminated against the dark sky. The wind had settled to a steady 8 miles per hour, enough to keep the fabric extended without strain. He thought about the way William Mercer had watched that same flag earlier, measuring it without words. There had been no performance in his gaze, only familiarity. Caleb Foster sat on the edge of his bunk, boots unlaced, elbows resting on his knees. He had always believed that history belonged to ceremonies, to framed photographs and formal speeches. Today had unsettled that belief. History had stood in front of him wearing a visitor badge and carrying a cane. Down the corridor, Captain Lawson closed his office door and removed his cover slowly, placing it on the desk with careful precision. He allowed himself a moment of stillness before opening a secure file on his computer. The identifier Atlas 3 appeared on the screen in plain text, followed by lines of documentation that were less about action and more about endurance. Long hours, impossible distances, decisions made without applause. Lawson read quietly, not searching for details, but for perspective. In another building across campus, Major General Holloway paused before leaving his office for the night. He stood by the window, looking toward the dim outline of the parade ground. He had saluted many decorated officers in his career, men and women whose accomplishments were publicly recorded and formally recognized. Yet that afternoon's salute had carried a different gravity. It had not been about rank. It had been about memory. Back in the barracks, Logan finally closed his manual and stood, walking toward the window. The campus lights glowed softly across the quad, steady and unremarkable. "We almost missed it," Noah said quietly from across the room. Logan nodded. "We will not again." Caleb exhaled slowly. "Respect is not automatic," he said. "It is awareness." The words hung in the quiet space, not dramatic, not rehearsed, just true. Outside, the flag continued to move gently. In the night breeze, fabric whispering against air that had cooled to 65 degrees. The field below was empty now, but it no longer felt ordinary. It felt layered, as though something unseen had settled into its foundation. Mercer was miles away by now, driving along a dark highway beneath a wide Texas sky, his hands steady on the wheel, his mind already turning toward tomorrow. He would not speak of the afternoon unless asked. He would not recount the salute or the silence. He did not need to. Some legacies do not chase recognition. They leave it behind. And across the campus he had walked that day, 3 young cadets lay awake longer than usual, understanding that leadership does not begin with volume. It begins with remembering who stood quietly before you ever did. Dawn arrived quietly over Westfield War College, a pale blue light stretching across the Texas horizon and spilling over the brick facades of academic halls. The air held a crisp edge at 58 degrees, cool enough to sharpen breath and steady thought. On the parade field, the first formation of the day assembled in precise rows, boots aligned along painted lines that had been measured down to the inch. Logan Pierce stood in the front rank, shoulders squared, eyes forward, but something in his posture had changed. It was not stiffness. It was intention. The memory of the previous afternoon did not distract him. It anchored him. Noah Bennett took his place 2 positions to the right, jaw relaxed yet focused. He had risen earlier than usual, reviewing not regulations, but reflection. Caleb Foster adjusted his cover with measured care, ensuring it sat perfectly level before the morning inspection began. The cadence call echoed across the field, firm and rhythmic, but beneath it was a new awareness that did not require words. Captain Lawson stepped onto the reviewing platform, hands clasped behind his back, observing quietly. He noticed it immediately, the subtle reduction in idle movement, the absence of whispered side comments. The way eyes tracked not only instructors, but one another. Respect had shifted from performance to practice. As the sun cleared the tree-line and light washed over the flagpole, the fabric caught a steady 12-mile-per-hour breeze, extending clean and unwavering against the sky. Logan felt the wind brush against his sleeve and remembered the way Mercer had watched. That same flag, measuring direction without comment. Leadership, he realized, was often silent observation before decisive action. When the inspection officer paused in front of him, Logan held steady, not out of fear of correction, but out of pride in standard. The officer gave a single approving nod and moved on. Across the formation, Noah and Caleb mirrored the same controlled composure. After drills concluded, Lawson addressed the cadets with a voice that carried evenly across the grass. "Yesterday," he said, without elaboration, "you were reminded that rank does not create legacy. Conduct does." He let the words settle without embellishment. No one asked for clarification. None was needed. In the administrative building overlooking the field, Major General Holloway reviewed a brief report that summarized the prior day's events in concise, formal language. He closed the folder and set it aside. Some reports were filed for record. Others were filed for reflection. Beyond the campus gates, miles away along a quiet highway, William Mercer drove beneath an open morning sky, the landscape stretching wide and uncomplicated. He had left before dawn, as was his habit, preferring long roads and quiet hours. He did not carry photographs or commendations on his dashboard. He carried memory, and that was enough. Back on the field, Logan gathered his two friends as they walked toward the academic wing. "From now on," he said calmly, "we measure first." Noah nodded. Caleb agreed without hesitation. It was not a vow spoken loudly. It was a standard adopted quietly. The campus resumed its routine rhythm, classes filling, instructors lecturing, schedules unfolding as they always had. Yet beneath the routine ran something steadier, something grounded. The wind moved cleanly across the parade ground, lifting the flag in a strong, straight line. And as sunlight settled fully over Westfield War College, the lesson carried forward without announcement. Some names are spoken once and remembered forever. Others are never spoken again, yet they shape the voices that follow. By the end of the week, the story had settled into the foundation of Westfield War College without ever being formally announced. No bulletin was posted. No assembly was called. Yet the change was visible in small, measurable ways. Logan Pierce noticed it first during a tactical leadership seminar held in a classroom overlooking the parade field. The instructor posed a scenario involving incomplete information and uncertain variables. In the past, Logan would have answered quickly, confident in decisiveness. This time he paused. He scanned the room, weighing the perspectives of others before speaking. When he finally did respond, his voice was steady, but measured. "Assessment before assertion," he said simply. The instructor gave a faint nod. Across the table, Noah Bennett leaned forward, adding, "Context defines command." Caleb Foster followed with quiet clarity. "And memory defines context." The room fell silent for a brief second, not because the statements were dramatic, but because they carried weight beyond the exercise. Captain Lawson, observing from the back of the classroom, felt a subtle shift of satisfaction. Leadership had moved from concept to application. Outside, the wind swept across the campus at a steady 10 miles per hour, rustling the branches of live oak trees that lined the central walkway. Cadets moved between classes with purposeful strides, conversations focused and restrained. The energy was not diminished. It was refined. In the administrative wing, Major General Holloway reviewed training reports with calm efficiency. A senior aide paused at his desk. "Sir, there has been noticeable improvement in composure metrics across first and second-year units." Holloway allowed a small, thoughtful pause before responding. "Composure is not trained," he said quietly. "It is awakened." He signed the report and set it aside. Meanwhile, miles away, William Mercer stopped at a roadside diner just outside a small Texas town. The morning sun filtered through the window as he sat alone with a cup of black coffee, watching traffic pass in steady intervals. No one recognized him. No one needed to. He unfolded a local newspaper, scanning headlines with calm detachment. When the waitress asked if he needed anything else, he offered a polite shake of the head and a simple thank you. His presence was unremarkable. His bearing was not. Back at the college, Logan, Noah, and Caleb stood once more on the parade field for evening drill. The commands rang out sharp and clear, boots striking in synchronized precision. As the formation halted and the flag was lowered with ceremonial care, Logan felt the weight of the fabric in his gloved hands. It was not heavy, but it mattered. Noah met his eyes briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Caleb kept his gaze steady on the horizon, where the sun dipped slowly beyond the tree-line. The field returned to quiet as dusk settled in. Captain Lawson remained a moment longer than required, watching the cadets disperse with deliberate composure. He understood something now that could not be captured in training manuals. Standards rise when examples appear unannounced, and the strongest lessons are often delivered without introduction. The campus lights flickered on, casting steady halos across brick and stone. Somewhere beyond the city limits, Mercer resumed his drive under a widening sky, the road stretching forward without fanfare. He did not look back. He did not need to. The standard had been set in silence. And silence, when rooted in memory, carries farther than command. Weeks passed, and what had begun as a single afternoon moment settled into the culture of Westfield War College like a steady foundation beneath visible structure. The parade field continued to host drills at precisely scheduled intervals, boots striking pavement in disciplined rhythm, commands delivered with clear authority. Yet beneath the routine, a quieter current flowed. Logan Pierce noticed it during a leadership rotation exercise when a visiting maintenance worker stepped onto the edge of the training zone to adjust a loose barrier. In the past, Logan might have waved him off without thought. This time, he approached first, offered a respectful greeting, and ensured the space was cleared safely before drills resumed. It was not dramatic. It was deliberate. Noah Bennett saw the same shift during a logistics briefing when a retired supply officer attended as a guest observer. Instead of focusing only on performance metrics, Noah asked questions about field adaptability and resource discipline. Caleb Foster applied the lesson in a mentoring session with first-year cadets, reminding them that bearing begins long before rank is pinned. "You do not wait to lead," he said evenly. "You prepare to carry weight before anyone gives it to you." Captain Lawson observed these changes with steady attention. Improvement reports reflected increased composure, reduced disciplinary corrections, and stronger peer accountability. None of the documentation referenced a specific afternoon. It did not need to. In his office overlooking the quad, Major General Holloway paused before a framed photograph on his wall. It depicted a much younger version of himself standing beside a group of instructors decades earlier. He studied the image quietly, then turned his gaze toward the campus outside his window. Standards endure when they are inherited, not enforced. Miles away, William Mercer walked along a quiet shoreline near his home, the Gulf breeze steady at 12 miles per hour, carrying the scent of salt and open water. He stood for a moment, cane planted lightly in the sand, watching the horizon stretch wide and uncomplicated. The world moved forward whether it remembered or not. His role had never been to demand memory. It had been to embody it. Back at the college, evening colors spread across the sky in layered shades of amber and deep blue as cadets assembled for sunset formation. The flag was lowered with precise care, folded in clean, deliberate motions. Logan felt the weight of the fabric once more and understood that leadership was not about standing in front of others. It was about standing steady when no one was watching. Noah and Caleb mirrored the same calm focus. When the formation was dismissed, conversations remained respectful, movements measured. The campus lights glowed softly against brick and stone, illuminating walkways that had carried countless footsteps before and would carry countless more after. In the quiet that followed, the lesson endured without repetition. Some legacies are not written into policy. They are carried forward in conduct. And as night settled once again over Westfield War College, The wind moved cleanly across the parade ground, lifting the flag one final time before darkness claimed the sky, steady and unwavering. Autumn arrived gradually over Westfield War College, brushing the tops of the live oak trees with muted shades of copper and gold. The air carried a cooler edge now, hovering near 60 degrees at sunrise, and the parade field felt broader beneath a sky that seemed clearer with each passing week. Logan Pierce stood at the front of a newly assigned training detail, his voice steady as he issued instructions to first-year cadets who mirrored his posture with careful attention. There was no edge in his tone, no unnecessary sharpness. Authority rested comfortably on discipline rather than display. Noah Bennett coordinated logistics for a field exercise scheduled later that afternoon, double-checking measurements, ensuring equipment alignment down to the inch, asking questions before assumptions formed. Caleb Foster mentored a small group under the shade of a brick archway, explaining that respect is not a reaction to rank, but a habit practiced daily. None of them mentioned the afternoon that had shifted their understanding. They did not need to. Captain Lawson watched from the perimeter of the field, hands clasped. Behind his back, observing the rhythm of instruction and response. He noticed how cadets now stepped aside for maintenance staff without being prompted, how greetings were offered with sincerity rather than obligation, how silence held weight instead of discomfort. Major General Holloway passed through the campus walkway during inspection week, nodding once as he observed the composure that had taken root. Standards had risen not through correction, but through example. Far from the campus, William Mercer stood once more by the shoreline, the Gulf wind steady at 15 miles per hour, pressing against his blazer as he looked out over the wide stretch of water. He did not dwell on the college. He trusted what he had seen in those young eyes. The tide moved in quiet repetition, waves folding gently against sand that remembered countless footprints before his own. Back at Westfield, the flag was raised at precisely 0700 hours, fabric climbing smoothly along the pole before catching the wind in a clean line against the pale morning sky. Logan felt the rope steady in his gloved hands and understood that leadership was not about the moment a general salutes. It was about the moments that follow when no one is watching. Noah met his gaze across the field, the exchange brief but grounded. Caleb stood tall at attention, posture no longer defined by ambition alone, but by awareness. The campus resumed its steady cadence of lectures, drills, and measured footsteps echoing across brick corridors. Yet something unseen remained woven into its foundation. A standard had been demonstrated without fanfare. A name had been spoken without volume. And from that day forward, 3 cadets carried themselves with the quiet understanding that legacy does not demand recognition. It demands remembrance. The wind moved cleanly across the parade ground, lifting the flag high and unwavering. Some legends do not raise their voices. They raise the standard.